Hey guys, Zomfox here, and today it is time to do another yearly video, well, I guess a new yearly video, and that is the top 5 best games of the previous season. Now, obviously this year it is time to do the 2025 UFL season. Last year we did it was a pretty fun video, and well, this season was a pretty mixed bag early on. Well, early on it was a really rough season, there was a lot of poor games, but then you had that one really bad Renegade Stallions game, and afterwards pretty much every game was at least decent. And that's just on the low side. We had a ton of great games. There were multiple weeks where if we were to do a tier list every game, you would have had 3 games at least in the B tier and potentially 3 in the A tier. Just a much better overall postseason, even though there was a stinker in there. Overall was much better. Basically, after the week 3 incident with the Stallions Renegades, it was a really good season. So this top 5 list, though, in all honesty, the top 4 were pretty easy to determine. And no, there is one special thing you'll see later in the video. Again, it's my top 5. I can do what I want, and you'll see what I mean when I get to it. But the 5th spot was the tough one, but in the end, I gave it to the Stallions-Panthers playoff game. The USFL Conference Championship, I ended up giving this spot to. It was a close one, but I decided this one would win out over some other ones. Now, this is entirely because it was a playoff game, because in terms of it being a super close, tight-knit game, technically their Week 9 game was better than this one. But this being a playoff game, being the first time the Panthers got the W, the first time the Stallions had ever lost in the postseason, the overall narrative for this game was just huge. Now, overall, Michigan they basically did what they did in the 2024 playoff game, except they didn't, take their foot off the gas at the end of the second quarter. Whereas this game, they just kept going. They scored almost 10 points in every single quarter, and Birmingham was in this game for quite a while, but the biggest difference was, of course, turnover differential. Birmingham had 2 more turnovers, and one of them was a pick 6. Jamar Smith, Matt Craw both got snaps, both of them threw an interception. Though the big talking point, of course, was the receiver battle in a lot of ways. Malik Turner and Deion Kane both had 2 of the best days we've ever seen receivers had in a playoff game. Deion Kane especially had like 6 receptions for like 120 yards and like something stupid like over 70 yards after catch. Perkins had a great game as usual. I mean, it was an overall incredible game in terms of performances from a lot of different players. To'o had a really solid game, all things considered. Perkins was insanely efficient. And the Stallions, though, their passing attack just wasn't as good as minus Deion Kane. That was a huge reason why Michigan ended up winning. It was a crazy scene to finally see Michigan get the W on them, because no matter what, it always felt like Birmingham was right in it. It wasn't until the very last 5 minutes where it really felt like, okay, the game's over and Michigan's going to win. Up until then, we all viewed that this was a legit game. But at the end of the day, the Panthers did get the W. It was a great win, so I'm putting this at number 5. Coming in at number 4 is the San Antonio Brahmas versus Memphis Showboats Friday night football game. This is a shocker. Yes, I know that some people aren't going to be fully behind me putting this one here, but in all honesty, it should be here. Look, some parts of being a great game is not that it is technically great football, it's that it's memorable. This game was probably the single most memorable game of the season. Yes, it's for a lot of the wrong reasons, but it was still an insanely fun game to watch. You had 2 teams have just some of the worst quarterback play you'll ever see. Troy Williams did basically nothing for Memphis, and Kevin Hogan went from actually looking like a really solid quarterback for the Brahmas for the few weeks before this to just having one of the worst games any quarterback had this season, including one of the most infamous interceptions where he's 3 yards away from the end zone and he just throws a pass directly to a D lineman in front of him that gets intercepted. Now, this, of course, was Deshaun Corbin's true breakout game. He had 140 yards on the ground. And this game went to OT. This was the second overtime game of the season, and it was a wild just ending. It looked like the Showboats were finally choking again, and they were able to just do enough due to certain things happening at the end to where they made it to OT. They survived the Brahmas comeback, and then in OT, they ended up winning. They outplayed the Brahmas. T-Will made a couple of big throws in the overtime period, and they ended up getting the W over the Brahmas. It was an incredible ending of a game that was just wild. Again, it was not great on a football standpoint in terms of being technically great football. It wasn't even like the defenses were playing great. It was just the offenses played really poor outside of Corbin. But it was a very memorable game on a Friday night. It was one of the most fun games of the entire season. There's a reason I put it in the S tier and a reason why it gets this spot. It was so much fun watching just some of the most insane quarterback play in a downside way, right? T-Will did nothing, and then Kevin Hogan had terrible throws. The best player was a tight end that made an incredible pass during the game. That was the only real good throw of the day in a lot of ways. This was an insanely fun and funny game. I feel like it has to be here on the top 5. It was a very memorable game, one of the most fun games you'll ever watch. So I think it deservedly gets the number 4 spot. Now, coming in at the number 3 spot is going to be both Arlington DC games. Yeah, this is the little cheat I'm doing on the list, but I feel like no one's going to really argue this one. Look, they both played 2 high-scoring, super tight-knit games that in total had a 7-point differential between them. DC won both of them, though it was on completely different ways. They were both great games. Now, I know you could try and pick one over the other, but I'm putting them both the same spot. I think they kind of deserve it. They were great games. Look, the first one was, of course, the massive comeback. The then record, 15-point comeback the DC Defenders pulled off against the Renegades, which is, despite DC deservedly losing at the end, right? With less than 6 minutes left, they got a fumble from Arlington, and then Teamu threw a terrible interception to Ajini Harris, and then the Renegades just did nothing with the ball, and they gave DC another chance to win it, which they did. Then in the rematch, it had the most infamous ending of the whole season where Luis Perez tried to call his own number with a fake spike, and he threw an interception in the game that, of course, got taken off ABC and put on ESPN2 because of the NBA pregame. It was absurd. But both these games deserve to be on this list. When you have 2 games that are 30 to 30 plus kind of scores, and they're close, it's pretty tough to not put them on a list like this. They were great games. Now, they're not the most memorable in regards to specific plays. I think that there's more memorable plays from the previous game. But as an overall rewatch or an overall game, these were just better than the Brahmins versus Showboats. And it shouldn't even really be close. These games are great. Now, yes, Perez, again, the fake spike really was a hilarious way to end that game. But overall, these are 2 games that, in a pure, just fun sort of passing standpoint, were solid games. There was a lot of action in both these games. It wasn't the sloppiest of football, though Teamu was especially in the first game, but they were able to get the comeback down. Seeing the Renegades choke that lead and then the Defenders ended up pulling off the W was insane, and in the rematch to see the ending be the way it was. You had a pair of games here which were just incredible watches. Really fun, high-octane games, just 300-plus yards every single team, both games. I don't think there's an argument to not put this one in the top 5, and I think that putting them both together on a spot is fair, because you could easily put one over the other, because in terms of overall play minus the fake spike, I think the second game was better. I think the first game had a bit more sloppy mistakes and bad turnovers. The second one had less of that, but the ending, of course, was insanely infamous, which arguably is a good thing in regards to a top 5 game kind of thing, because it's super memorable. They're both great games. I'm putting them together at 3. So, DC and Arlington, both matches get the 3 spot. Now, coming in at the number 2 spot is going to be the Showboats versus Stallions Friday Night Football game. This is week 6, and this was a great game. I think this game has been one of the most underappreciated and underrated games of the entire season. It was the first of a really great amount of games that weekend, so it kind of got swept under the rug a bit in terms of recency bias, but I think this was overall the best game, second best game of the entire season. The final score is 24-20. It was the first OT game in the UFL's history. Obviously not if you can include USL and XFL, but in UFL history, it was the first OT. And this is not like that first safety they tried to put out a few weeks ago, or I guess a couple months ago at this point, but this was the first OT game, and it was insane. This is one of those where it was like the Brahmas game. It looked like a classic Memphis choke job, where they had this game in the bag, and then they just let Birmingham score and then force OT. But they were able to stop them and not let them win in regulation, forced OT, and were perfect. They got 2 scores, and Birmingham got stopped twice, and Memphis won. Now, it's also important to note the context heading into this game. The Showboats have not won a single game all season. They are starting Dresser Win for the first time ever. The Stallions, due to injuries, are forced to start Case Cookus against his former team in the Showboats. So it is Dresser Win versus Case Cookus, a matchup nobody saw coming heading into the season, especially considering that before he got cut, Dormade, Win wasn't even on the Showboats roster, and Cookus didn't even sign to the Stallions till the very end of the offseason. So to see this matchup happen mid-season was just wild, and the fact that Memphis actually pulled off the W was absurd. It was a crazy moment to see, because not even Memphis played perfect football. It's not like they were great on third downs. They were 33%, which isn't the worst we've seen, but it wasn't incredible. Overall, this was a very fun game and a very close one. really solid football. Again, it was one of those where it had a story on it, right? It had the storyline, basically. Memphis gets this early lead. They, shut out Birmingham in the first quarter. Then they head into halftime with this big lead. It's 17-3. And it's like, are they going to choke it? And then, the third quarter happens. They didn't really do much. Birmingham scored some. Fourth quarter happens. It's like, oh my God, Memphis is going to choke it. But then they get to force OT, and they win. And it was insane. You did have the whole thing with Skip Holtz trying to challenge, and he said a different number than what was needed, and whole controversy there. Overall ending still insane. The fact that Memphis actually won their first game of the season against this Birmingham team was wild. Especially because this ended up, tying Birmingham for the most losses in a season ever, right? Their most ever was 2 in 2023's USFL season. And so just in week 6, they tied it, which again matched that season. It was insane. It was an insane moment to see the Showboats get this W. So, get number 2. But number 1 is the Stallions Battlehawks for a second consecutive season. I think this one has to be here. Look, this game once again had a ton of hype behind it, and it once again lived up to it. Insanely tight contest the entire way through. It was a 1-point difference in the end, 29-28. And just like last year, the home team won. This was Jamar Smith really showing that he could be that guy for this team. We all know what happened in the playoffs, but when this game happened, it was like, man, Jamar is really that guy this season. And Max Duggan, this would be pretty much the last time we looked at him as like a legit threat at the quarterback position, because afterwards it was not great. But this game, it was still great. Now, St. Louis wasn't even perfect. Again, they had bad third down percentage, under 33%. There was turnovers in this game. There was red zone inefficiency by Birmingham versus red zone efficiency by St. Louis. You had running back play that was crucial. It was an insane game. It was just like the year prior where you could take so many plays and say, well, if this one was different, if there wasn't a fumble here, if there wasn't, an overthrow there, that it could be the other way around, which is a great game. The fact that we got another super tight barn burner, it might not be as high scoring as DC versus Arlington, but this game to live up to the hype again, we just couldn't see that happening. We all expected this one to be worse than last year's because it was just saying no way it's going to be as good. Like, look, the Michigan versus St. Louis game almost made this list, and it was great just like their year prior, but for different reasons. Because the year prior was great in a sense it was a super close game, but there's a lot of bad play in it. Whereas last year's Birmingham-St. Louis game was a great game, and it was a great game, and this one hit it again. It's pretty tough to put any other game at the one spot. I would have loved to put the Memphis Stallions game up here for the sake of just being how shocking it was. But the fact this game lives up to the hype again despite all the issues. Like, imagine heading into this season saying that Max Duggan versus Jamar Smith was going to be an all-time classic spring football game. They just wouldn't have believed you. The fact it ended up being that way is just insane. This was an insane game. St. Louis arguably played worse, but again, they were good where it mattered. This is another one of those games that proved why red zone efficiency matters, right? Just like the Renegade Stallions, how bad a game it was, it did prove that. This one did as well. The team that was more efficient in the red zone ended up winning. If turnover differential is the same, then the next best thing is usually red zone efficiency. It was a great thing for the Battlehawks in that day because they were good at it. Birmingham wasn't. And they got the W, and they get the number 1 spot in the best games of the 2025 UFL season. So that'll do it for this video. This has been Zomfox. Let me know down below what you think about this list. Do you want to change anything? Do you have a different top 5 entirely? A couple games being different? I know there's a couple that were close. There's a couple Panthers ones, especially the Panthers versus Renegades was a close one to make in the list. But I felt like that was one of those games where there's a lot more of miscues made the game better, and not in like a Memphis versus San Antonio where it was like hilarious in a sense where the Michigan was just making mistakes. So I didn't want to put that one on here. Subscribe to the channel with the bell turned on because I still upload at least 2 videos a week during this off season. Got a ton of videos planned. I don't know when this exactly is being uploaded, but it's either being uploaded with a bunch of stuff coming out before or afterwards. Bottom line is I'm trying to make this a good summer for the UFL content, even though, of course, the season is over. So let me know down below, again, what you think of this video. If you have any ideas for a future video, think about becoming a community member for as low as 99 cents a month. And as always, guys, have a great night.